Welcome back to the deep dive. So, today we're trying something w- ambitious. We're going way, way back.
We really are. We're trying to get inside the heads of our hunter-gatherer ancestors.
Right, because for almost all of human history, sapiens lived as foragers, didn't they?
That's exactly it. I mean, the last 10,000 years, agriculture, industry, it's just a blink of an eye, really, a tiny fraction of our time on Earth.
So, this deep dive, our mission is to figure out how that incredibly long period shaped us, our minds, our behaviors, everything. We're drawing a lot from echoes of Eden, our hunter-gatherer ancestors for this.
And it matters because, well, evolutionary psychology argues that our brains are still kind of running on that ancient software.
Even now, in our world of smartphones and cities.
Especially now. It influences, our eating habits, conflicts, even relationships and sexuality. This modern world interacts with minds shaped way back on the savannah.
Which might explain why, even with all our stuff and longer lives, people often feel, I don't know, alienated, depressed, kind of pressured.
That's definitely a key idea. This mismatch between our ancient programming and our modern environment. It's huge.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What's a clear example of this mismatch?
Well, the classic one is the Gorging Gene theory. Why do we crave high-calorie food so much?
Yeah, why is it so hard to resist that cake or, a giant soda?
Think back to the Stone Age. Sweet things, like really ripe fruit, were incredibly rare, and food generally was scarce. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. You wouldn't just walk past a fig tree loaded with fruit.
Exactly. The sensible thing, the survival thing, was to eat as much as you possibly could right there, right then, before the competition got it.
Or the baboons, yeah.
Right. So that instinct, gorge on calories when you find them, got hardwired into our genes.
And our DNA still thinks we're living like that, even when the fridge is full.
Pretty much. Our genes are still whispering, eat the whole tub of ice cream. Who knows when you'll find this again, even though, intellectually, we know better.
So that ancient survival trait becomes a liability today. It's not just willpower, it's evolution working against us in a way.
It's a profound mismatch. And understanding that changes how you see things like public health issues, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, the gorging gene seems pretty logical. But what about social structures? That seems way more complicated. The source mentions some big debates there.
Oh, absolutely. Much more debated. And the evidence is often described as, well, flimsy is the word used. It's tough.
So what are the main competing ideas?
One major debate is around, like, the basic family unit. Was it nuclear families, like we often assume, or something else?
Something else, like what?
Well, there's the ancient commune theory. This suggests foraging bands didn't really have private property or strict monogamy or even clear paternity sometimes.
Wow. So women might have had multiple partners and kids were raised more communally.
That's the idea, all the adults cooperating in parenting. And you see echoes of this, or at least parallels, in chimps and bonobos, our closest relatives.
The source mentioned the Bari Indians, too.
Yes, a fascinating example. Their belief is that a child benefits from accumulating sperm from several men, the best hunter, the best storyteller, and so on. So a woman might actively seek multiple partners during pregnancy.
That's quite different from modern norms.
Exactly. And proponents of this theory argue that maybe things like infidelity, divorce rates, psychological issues today,
Right.
maybe they stem from forcing ourselves into a nuclear family model that doesn't quite fit our ancient wiring.
Okay, that's a really provocative thought, but there's another side to it, right? The eternal monogamy idea.
Right. Many scholars push back hard. They say, no, look, monogamy and nuclear families are core human behaviors. They argue ancient societies, while maybe communal and sharing resources, still had these basic family units. A couple may be jealous in their shared kids.
And that would explain why monogamy and nuclear families are the norm in most places today, and maybe why possessiveness is so common.
That's the counter-argument. It suggests these structures are deeply rooted. But again, resolving this is incredibly difficult. We just don't have the solid evidence.
Because there are no written records, right?
So-
Just stones and bones, basically. And you mentioned most tools might have been wood anyway.
Precisely. Which means they just rotted away. Calling it the Stone Age might be totally misleading. It should probably do the Wood Age. That alone shows how much we might be missing.
Yeah, that really shifts the perspective. So relying on modern hunter-gatherer groups isn't a perfect solution either.
No, we have to be really careful there. For one, modern groups have all had contact with and been influenced by farming or industrial societies.
Okay.
And secondly, they often live in really marginal environments, like the Kalahari Desert. That's probably not representative of the fertile river valleys where ancient foragers might have thrived. The environment shapes social structure, population density,
Hmm.
everything.
So different environments, different ways of life.
Hugely different. And maybe the most important point is just the sheer diversity of hunter-gatherer societies. Even within one region, like Australia, you had hundreds of tribes, different languages, different beliefs, different social norms.
So the idea of one single ancient life that our brains are adapted to, it's maybe too simple.
It seems that way. Ever since the cognitive revolution gave us fiction and shared myths, there hasn't been one natural way for sapiens to live. Only cultural choices. A huge menu of possibilities.
That's a really key insight. Endless cultural choices, not a single biological mandate. Okay, so despite the diversity, can we make any generalizations?
Well, it seems safe to say most people lived in small bands. Maybe a few dozen, up to a few hundred individuals,
And they were all human.
all human. With one really notable exception.
Let me guess.
Dogs.
Dogs. The first animal we domesticated, and this was way back, maybe 15,000 years ago or even earlier, long before farming.
What did they use them for back then?
Hunting, fighting, acting as an alarm system against predators or other humans, and over time we co-evolved. There seems to have been a real depth of understanding, affection even.
Like that burial found in Israel. The woman buried with the puppy. Exactly. That 12,000-year-old grave, with her hand resting on the dog. It speaks volumes about that ancient bond, doesn't it?
It really does. So back to the human bands. They knew each other really well.
Incredibly intimately. Loneliness, even privacy, would have been pretty rare concepts, I imagine. You're constantly surrounded by family and friends.
Did bands interact much?
Oh, yeah. They competed, for sure, maybe even fought. But they also cooperated extensively. Trading members, hunting together, sharing rare goods like shells or amber, building alliances, holding religious festivals.
That cooperation must have been a big advantage for sapiens.
A crucial edge, yes. And most bands were nomadic, constantly moving.
Following the seasons, the animal herds.
Right, wandering across territories that could be hundreds of square kilometers. This constant movement was basically the engine driving human expansion across the globe.
Were there any permanent settlements back then?
Very rarely, but yes. Usually where resources were incredibly abundant and reliable, like rich fishing spots along coasts. We see evidence of permanent or semi-permanent fishing villages, like on Indonesian islands 45,000 years ago. They might have even been bases for colonizing places like Australia.
Okay, so what did they actually do all day? How did they get food?
Well, foraging was very flexible, opportunistic. They'd gather plants, dig roots, collect insects, stalk small game, hunt big animals, whatever was available.
We tend to picture man the hunter, but gathering was more important.
For calories and materials, yes. Gathering seems to have been the main activity, provided the bulk of their diet and things like fiber for ropes or wood for tools. Hunting was important, prestigious maybe, but gathering was the bedrock.
And they weren't just foraging for food, but for knowledge, too.
Absolutely. The average forager needed an incredibly deep, practical knowledge of their environment. Which plants are edible, which are medicinal, which are poisonous.
Yeah.
How do animals behave? How do you read the weather? How do you make tools on the spot?
Like chipping a spear point from flint.
Exactly. In minutes. They had to be masters of their surroundings in a way that, honestly, most of us today just aren't. We specialize so much.
It's humbling, really. The source even suggested our average brain size has decreased since then.
Yeah, that's a fascinating kind of controversial idea. The theory is that as societies got more complex with agriculture, you could survive by relying on others' skills. New niches opened up, maybe even, as the source puts it rather bluntly, niches for imbeciles.
Wow, so they were knowledgeable, skilled, physically adept. It leads to the surprising idea you mentioned earlier.
Right, the concept of the original affluent society.
That just sounds wrong, doesn't it? We think of them struggling constantly.
I know. But consider the evidence. Even in tough environments like the Kalahari, studies suggest they only worked, meaning hunting or gathering, about 35 to 45 hours a week.
Seriously, that's less than a modern office job, often.
Way less than many modern jobs. They hunted maybe one day in 3. Gathering took maybe 3 to 6 hours a day. And think about household chores. No dishes, no vacuuming, no paying bills.
So more leisure time.
Definitely seems like it. More time for socializing, storytelling, playing with kids, just hanging out.
And the work itself was probably more varied and engaging than, say, working on an assembly line.
You'd think so. One day roaming the forest, gathering mushrooms, maybe tracking an animal. The next day relaxing at camp. Compare that to 10 hours of repetitive factory work. Plus, occasional encounters with tigers to keep things interesting.
Oh, okay, point taken. What about their health? Diet?
Generally, their nutrition seems to have been excellent. Very, very diet, dozens of different things, potentially. This protected them from the kind of malnutrition or famine that plagued later peasant farmers who relied on just one or two staple crops.
So they were actually healthier than their farming descendants.
Evidence suggests they were often taller and healthier, yes, and less prone to infectious epidemics.
Why is that?
Well, many infectious diseases like smallpox and measles actually jumped to humans from domesticated animals. Foragers didn't have large herds of domesticated animals. Plus, they lived in small, mobile bands, not crowded, permanent settlements where disease could spread easily.
Okay, but life expectancy was low, wasn't it? Like 30 or 40.
That average is a bit misleading. It was heavily skewed by very high child mortality rates. If you
Oh.
survived childhood, which was the dangerous part, your chances of living to 60 or even 80 were actually reasonably good.
So not quite the short, brutish life we sometimes imagine. But it wasn't perfect, right? We shouldn't romanticize it.
Absolutely not. It would be a huge mistake to idealize it. Life could still be incredibly harsh. A simple accident, a broken bone, could be a death sentence. And social conflict, being ostracized by your band, that could be devastating.
The source gives some really disturbing examples from the Ashe people in Paraguay.
Yes, research from anthropologists who lived with them even up until the 1960s. Some accounts are difficult to read.
Like abandoning the sick or
Yeah.
worse.
There are accounts of infanticide, killing babies for various reasons, being born without hair, being the wrong gender, even just because someone was in a bad mood, and killing elderly people, particularly women, who were seen as burdens.
That's horrifying by our standards. That story about the man nicknamed Vulture Droppings.
Yeah, left for dead, but he survived. And the accounts of men saying things like, "I customarily killed old women." It's chilling.
But the source urges caution here too, right? Don't judge too quickly.
Exactly. It's crucial. The same anthropologist noted that violence between Ashe adults was very rare. They changed partners freely, seemed generally happy, laughed a lot, had no real leaders, and disliked bossy people. They were generous, valued social connection.
So how do you reconcile those two sides, the generosity and the harshness?
Well, their perspective on killing the very young or very old might have been closer to how some people today view abortion or euthanasia. It's a different moral framework.
Right.
And importantly, they were being actively hunted by Paraguayan farmers at the time. That constant threat likely influenced their behavior, maybe making them harsher than they would have been otherwise.
So complex. Not angels, not demons, just humans in extreme circumstances.
Precisely. Just like our ancient ancestors probably were. Complex humans navigating their world.
Okay, moving from the physical and social to the inner world. Their beliefs, their spirituality, that seems like the biggest mystery.
It really is. The source calls it one of the biggest holes in our understanding of human history. We can guess at their diet, but what did they think about the world? Did they believe trees had spirits?
Most scholars lean towards animism, right?
Yes, that seems to be the consensus. Animism, the belief that almost everything around you, not just humans, but animals, plants, rivers, rocks, storms, has awareness, feelings, a spirit maybe, and that these spirits can communicate with humans.
So you might talk to a deer before hunting it, or a shaman might consult a river spirit.
Exactly. It's about relationships with specific, local beings and forces. Not necessarily universal, all-powerful gods like in later religions, but a world alive with spirits and consciousness.
But animism is a huge umbrella term, isn't it?
Massive. Just like saying theism covers ancient polytheists and modern monotheists. Animism likely covered thousands of different specific beliefs, cults, religions across different forager bands. We have only the vaguest idea of their specific prayers, rituals, taboos. It's largely lost.
Still, sometimes archaeology gives us glimpses, like that Sunghir burial site in Russia.
Yes, Sunghir, about 30,000 years old. Really remarkable finds there.
There was the older man buried with thousands of ivory beads, suggesting status.
Right. Around 3,000 beads plus fox teeth, bracelets. It took immense effort to make those beads. It definitely hints at some kind of hierarchy, maybe a leader.
But the children's burial was even more striking.
Oh, incredibly so. A boy, maybe 12 or 13, and a girl, 9 or 10, buried head to head. And they were covered in even more beads, over 10,000 between them.
And the work involved. Thousands of hours.
Estimates are around 7,500 hours of skilled labor just for the beads. That's years of work.
So how did kids get that kind of status? They couldn't have earned it.
That's the million-dollar question. Was it inherited status? Did leadership pass down through families even back then? Were they seen as reincarnations of important spirits? Or was it something darker, like a ritual sacrifice?
We just don't know.
We don't. But what Sunghir does show, powerfully, is that 30,000 years ago, sapiens were already creating complex social and political ideas, imagined realities that went way beyond basic biology or primate behavior. They were inventing culture with a capital C.
Okay, one last big contentious area. Violence and warfare. Were they peaceful hippies or brutal savages?
Yeah, that's another huge debate. And again, the source emphasizes both extreme views, then Peace Corps Paradise and the constant warfare are basically castles in the air.
Yeah.
They're built on very thin evidence.
Because it's hard to interpret the evidence we do have. A cracked skull could be an accident, not a murder.
Exactly. And most deaths in pre-industrial warfare weren't from weapons anyway. They were from starvation, disease, cold, things that don't leave obvious marks on skeletons. Distinguishing a massacre site from a natural disaster cemetery is really tough.
But there is some evidence pointing towards significant violence, isn't there?
There is, and some of it is quite sobering. That study from the Danube Valley, before agriculture, about 4.5% of skeletons showed signs of violence.
Which is comparable to the 20th century, with all its wars.
Astonishingly, yes, that percentage is right up there with one of the most violent centuries in recorded history.
And other sites were even worse.
Jabal Sahaba in Sudan, 12,000 years old. 40% of skeletons had projectile points embedded in them, or other signs of violence. One woman had 12 distinct injuries.
12.
An off-net cave in Bavaria. Skulls of men, women, children, babies, showing damage from clubs and knives. Looks like a whole group was massacred.
So the peaceful paradise idea, probably not accurate.
It seems unlikely to be universally true, but the constant brutal warfare idea probably isn't right either.
So the real picture is more varied.
Almost certainly. Just like their religions and social structures varied, their levels of violence likely varied enormously across time and place. Some were probably quite peaceful, others experienced intense conflict. Humans being humans, capable of both great cooperation and terrible violence.
It feels like we keep coming back to this curtain of silence, as the source calls it. So much is just lost.
Tens of thousands of years are largely irretrievable. We'll never know about their great political dramas, their alliances, their philosophies, their art, beyond the fragments that survived. Were there great thinkers, artists, leaders whose names and stories vanished completely? Almost certainly.
So why keep asking these questions if the answers are so hard to find?
Because if we don't ask, we risk dismissing maybe 90% of human history as irrelevant. We risk basing our entire understanding of human nature on the very recent, very unusual period of agriculture and industry. Asking the questions, even without easy answers, reminds us how deep and complex our history really is.
And acknowledging that these ancient foragers weren't just passively living in nature, they actively shaped it.
Massively. That idea of pristine wilderness is often an illusion. Foragers caused huge changes, drove extinctions, altered landscapes. They were arguably the most impactful ecological force the planet had seen up to that point. Maybe the most destructive, even.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've seen how deep our evolutionary past runs, how it still influences us. We've explored the surprising complexity, the diversity, the affluence even, but also the harsh realities of forager life.
And the huge gaps in our knowledge, the mysteries that remain about their inner lives and social worlds.
Right. It all underlines how crucial understanding this long period is for understanding ourselves today, the challenges and contradictions of modern life.
Absolutely.
So maybe a final thought for you listening right now. If our bodies and minds really are, in many ways, still wired for that ancient hunter-gatherer existence, what could you maybe do practically in your own life? What small changes could help you align a bit better with that ancient design for well-being, even living here now surrounded by concrete and screens? Something to think about.